My name is Morgan Gray, and welcome back to the Afrocentric Podcast.
Get that. Fuck a meeting, we about to have a sit down. Wrap the phone up in plastic and stick it in the fridge. They know what we are, but they don't know what we did. Anything about a mixer, murder getting sent. Gotta speak it cold when you're talking on the phone. Sticking to the code, they'll listen to the song. I told my team about manifestation. People are basic, they thought I was crazy. Hard with the witchcraft, steady every night. Philosopher stone, I perform another rite. Right meaning ritual created dry ice. Hid in plain sight with a suit and tie nice. Mason mean more than a bricklayer. Salmonella moving chicken, got my chick taser. Poison that was given, distributed in the streets. Find another way to eat, I'ma quit slang. Bread when the gang made niggas quit hang. Other side hated when a nigga bang money. Thumbing through the law books, ain't he know the law? Sent a hitting Baton Rouge, ain't he getting off? Third eye focus, wonder what he saw. Power in the tongue. Bullets in your car, you ain't wanna have it on. You try to pull it, but you lost. War never knew mercy. Our lady of the lake won't receive you with open arms. You and yellow tape. But Lucci going stupid, he'll do it every day. Tumble in your grandmother and do it in your face. Shitting in the jag, nigga, you got doodle in your face. What you doing? Don't you know it ain't no doing it with gates? Peculiar, ooly, a noodle, your grape. Lot of days spent in the cage wasn't what you think. Washing clothes with the toilet water, drinking out the same hard. That hurt your back when it's no option. Everybody boxed and trying to release toxin. Fuck a meeting, we about to have a sit down. Not a part of this, pussy nigga can't sit round. Bread when the business mind of bitches getting dick down. Get the phone back when they finish, get them kicked out. All in favor of a favor for a favor. Any other matter, we gon' bring it to the table. Organization gotta have communication. Full participation, breadwinners in the making. Fuck a meeting, we about to have a sit down.
We don't funk with racism. We don't funk with people who don't support the LGBTQ plus community. And baby, we damn sure don't funk with anybody who don't love a beautiful black queen, baby. You see this tape?
You don't let nobody act black and then go home and be white.
It only takes a little bit of white brainwash to activate the coon chip in the average Negro.
And a lot of white folk have demonstrated eloquently that they don't have no sense.
Today, I wanted to have a serious conversation with you all about race and racism within America specifically. Now, I understand that for the bulk of you, the last time someone sat down and had a serious conversation with you, it surrounded topics that involve birds and bumblebees. But I feel like talking about racism is way more important with the climate that we are living through right now. Talking about racism is not an attempt to guilt, trip, or shame anyone. In fact, it is about spreading awareness so that it can be properly addressed. So, if I were you, I would stick around to the end of this episode to hear me answer the nefarious question, can Black people be racist? Welcome back to Freestyle 10, Racism for Dummies.
Can Black comedians be racist?
A Black person can't be racist by definition.
Why is that?
Because we don't have any control over people's lives. I can't tell you what neighborhood to live in. I can't tell you what school to go to. I can't tell you you're a second-class citizen. I can't tell you that you can't vote. If I get on that corner and say, I get on that corner for 5 years and I stand there and I go, I'm going to take me a knife and I'm going to cut your throat, and I'm going to take a car and I'm going to run you over, and I'm going to take this hammer and I'm going to beat you till you dead. If I never kill anybody, am I a murderer? When I kill somebody, what does that make me? A murderer. I don't care what I talk about. I can talk about it all day long. All we do is talk. White folks do. White folks make laws. There's laws in the book. I'm from Louisiana that said if you marry out of your race, you go to jail. You understand? There's laws that you can't own property. They made laws. Laws. You can't vote. You can't go to school. You can't live in this area. You ain't never seen a sign that said, white boy, if you in this town, when this sun goes down, we're going to hang you. Now have you? That's racism, a practice, what you preach. I hate that crap when they say that. It's like the race card. You're so worried about it. I'm worried about how in the hell did it get in the deck? And they brainwash everybody. They have a brainwashing machine that's unreal. That's why you can't catch a cab in New York. Because they think that you're the enemy. The color of your skin condemns you. That's why white people live 8 years longer than we do. Because we have to put up with this crap. I go through it all the time. I get sick of it. I get sick of it. I go into a five-star hotel. I come here to do the Dave Letterman show. 8 o'clock in the morning. I cannot make this up. I'm not this good. I get on the elevator. There's a white woman there in civilian clothes, probably about 45, looks at me and says, "Can I help you?" I said, "Can you?" "Well, who in the hell are you?" "I'm the maid." I said, "Well, bitch, go make up a bed and get the hell out of my face." Can you imagine a grown woman, I'm a mature black gentleman, asking me that, opening that door? I could have went crazy. She opened a very dangerous door. Agreed? Agreed. These are the things I have to go through as a black male. I don't like it. This is insanity. And it doesn't happen only because of white people, because of black Anglo-Saxon. You could be white up here. I'm in first class. I'm at the JFK, and the black woman's asking me, "Do you know what line you're in?" Because I'm in first class. I said, "Do I look like Stevie Wonder?" "Yeah, I know where I am. I'm in first class, and you cannot help me. Go get your white manager. I don't want to talk to you, you dummy."
Race is a term that refers to the concept of dividing people into populations or groups based on various sets of physical characteristics, which usually results from genetic ancestry, but that is not always the case in most times. So, race or races are assumed to be distinguished by skin color, type, and etc. But they can also be assumed because of someone's eye shape, their bone structure, or their hair texture. Again, race is oftentimes assumed because it's really just based off of someone looking at you and assigning them into a category in which makes them feel more comfortable. What I want to focus on is the concept that race is in fact a social construct. So when I say that race is a social construct, what I'm saying is that race is a human invented classification system, and it was invented in a way to help define physical differences between people, but have more often than not been used as a tool of oppression and in violence. In order to put it into perspective for you guys, I wanted to say that race was in fact invented in 1735. Race was invented in 1735. So it is a relatively new concept. And I also don't think that race will be a concept that will always be forever a lasting legacy within the earth. I think that after a while, the way that we look at race will be extinct because how we look at race changes over time, and you can see that in different parts of America as well as different parts of like South America. What I wanted to talk about really is the origins of race. So really race really had its first origins through the Crusades. So the Crusades was a period of white on white crimes that happened in Europe. So the Crusades within themselves was a series of religious initiated, supported, and sometimes directed by the Latin Church in the medieval period. And the best known of the Crusades are those in the Holy Land during the period of 1095 through 1291, and that was intended to recover Jerusalem and its surrounding area from Islamic rule. Okay. During the Crusades, it is estimated that 5 million people lost their lives. Okay. Those are all white people. So what happened is essentially is the Pope looked around and he was like, "God damn it. All my people is gone. They dead. We're going to have to do something about this if we're going to have world domination." So they said because essentially what you cannot do is look at a person and tell what their race is, what their religion is. I cannot look at an individual and be like, "Oh, you look like a Christian. That's biased. Oh, you look like a Jew. That's biased." So instead of going based off of what religion someone is or is not, they decided to go based off of someone's skin color. That's easy. It was during that time easy to identify. There were such stark differences, and they took it as a way to say, hey, if they're not within this race, they are not superior. And if you're within this race, you are not superior. So, what is racism? Racism is a different form of racial prejudice or hatred or discrimination. Racism involves one group of people having the power to carry out systemic discrimination through institutional policies and practices of the society by shaping the cultural beliefs and the values that support those racist policies and practices. That is the official, very loose-fitting form of racism. And I'm going to read it to you again. Racism involves one group having the power to carry out systemic discrimination through the institutional policies and practices of the society and by shaping the cultural beliefs and values that support those racist policies and practices. Racism is the belief that one race is superior to another, and this is built on the belief that people who are quote unquote different are somehow inferior to one other political group. Okay, so as you can see, people who invite racism into their life or work within the bounds of racism do it because they want to be superior. And those who have this type of power, they have the power to be able to enact political policies and practices upon people who are inferior. That is the huge difference between who can and cannot be racist, in my personal opinion. But racism also is different from bias. So let's focus more on what an implicit bias is. An implicit bias is also known as unconscious or hidden bias, and it has negative associations that people unknowingly hold, and they are expressed automatically without conscious awareness. So racism differs from bias, which is a conscious or an unconscious prejudice against an individual or a group based off of their identity. Basically, racial bias is a belief, but racism is what happens when that belief translates into action. So, for example, a person might unconsciously or consciously believe that people of color are more likely to commit a crime or to be dangerous. That's bias. A person might become anxious if they perceive a Black person is angry. That stems from a bias. These biases can become racism through a number of actions, ranging in severity and ranging in an individual to group level response. Okay, so let me see if I can hone this idea in and give you a great example. So a racial bias might be that a white woman believes that Black people are angry, or she believes that they're violent, or she believes that they steal. Now, that is a conscious or unconscious belief, but it has no action to it. That is just a thought. So that is a bias. She is biased towards Black people at this point. Now, when it becomes racism is when she starts to add action to that biased belief. So, for example, let's say she gets into an elevator, two like dark-skinned men, I don't know, 6'2", 6'3", they get in the elevator with her. She clutches her purse, or she tries to close the elevator door on them quicker than they could get into the elevator. That is racism. Although it is minute, it is still racism because it is the action plus the biasness.
Why do you not like Black people?
I already told you.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, I did.
You never gave me a What have they ever done to you?
I didn't say they did anything to me.
Well, then why do you not like them?
They make me nervous.
Well, you think... But if Black people have never done anything to you, why would they make you nervous?
They commit a lot of crime.
So do white people.
They make me nervous too.
No. But you're not racist towards white people.
I'm white. How can I be a racist towards white people?
But why do you use the N-word?
Because it's a descriptor.
It is not. It's a slur.
And you never heard me use that term.
I have heard you use it.
Oh, yeah.
Never?
Don't use it.
You have used it.
I may have, being facetious, but I never used that term ever in my life.
You used it last night when we were talking about Blazing Saddles.
Well, I know I was just trying to make a point to you that I don't want to watch that shit.
Well, I mean, you can't say you've never used it in your life when you've used it.
Well, okay, I use it. I use it all the time. It's my business.
But if black people have never done anything to you, I don't know why you'd hate them so much.
I don't hate them. I just wish they'd go away.
That sounds like hate to me. Are you a white supremacist?
Not really, not anymore.
Not, but you used to be?
Not really. See, Tim, you cannot put your mind back in the day when I was growing up. Then weren't racist. It wasn't considered racist.
People
It
back
was
then?
not. Will you listen to me and shut up for a minute?
Oh my God!
It was not considered racist. It was just the way things were. Now you can call it whatever the hell you can call it, a boat full of assholes right now, but right back then it was just the way it was.
Well, maybe people didn't call it out as racist, but I mean, looking back, can't you say, yeah, that was racist?
I mean, yeah, you can look back at a lot of things and tell how shitty they were. I mean, are we ever going to let go of that and just get on with our lives?
Racism in many ways can manifest itself, and if you look at it a certain way, racism is an umbrella term because it houses so many different forms of racism. So that is what I want to talk about in this particular segment. The first form of racism I wanted to talk about is internalized racism. Internalized racism is racism that is within a person's mind that shapes the way that they think and the way that they view others. In many cases, this refers to an automatic subconscious, and it is a preference for white people. They will oftentimes internalize these false beliefs about race and favor whiteness in their minds. You can see this specifically towards, I guess, beauty standards. I would say that when white people think about hair or shape and size, let's talk about shape and size. So because white people find beauty when they look at life through a Eurocentric perspective or a Eurocentral lens, they see beauty as thin whiteness, especially right now, this time period, as the Kardashians have dissolved their lip fillers, they've dissolved their BBLs, and they've dyed their hair back to their original forms. Now people are looking and subconsciously preferring the whiteness, and it is internalized. That is internalized racism. It is on a very micro level. It really doesn't affect us physically as it does socially. So the next one, which does not need to be confused with internationalized racism, is interpersonal racism. And interpersonal racism is the racism that one can inflict on another in a personal interaction based off of their prejudice. So internalized racism is the thought. Interpersonal racism is the action itself. So let's take it a step further. So because they internalize this idea of whiteness within their head, this internalized racism, they acted up on this bias. So although I see that women who are thinner and smaller to be beautiful because I internalize whiteness, maybe this specific person works in the modeling agency or sells goods and brands and luxury brands to people over the internet, and they're responsible for scouting people on social media to be able to give them closed brands. They might not see someone who isn't thin, who isn't light skinned, who doesn't have kinky hair as a form of beauty, and they will not give them an opportunity. And that's the difference between internalized racism and interpersonal racism. It's the fact that you won't give someone an opportunity. And that reminds me of that bullshit that Raven Simone was talking about. And I talked about this earlier in my earlier segments when I was talking about the coonery and the foolishness, because she was talking about someone's name. She was talking about the fact that because someone had a very ghetto name, she would look at their resume and throw it into the trash can and not even give them an opportunity to be able to get a job based off their name. And I feel like that's number one, that's stupid as fuck, because you can't can't change what somebody else named you. I mean, you can, but who's really going to do that? It takes so much money and time to be able to do it. So that is another example of interpersonal racism. Now, the next form of racism I wanted to focus on is individual racism. Individual racism is the racism that a person feels and the way that racism influences how they treat others. We see this on social media all the time. I know during Halloween, we saw a lot of individual racism. There was a group of white teens walking around Wally World, and 2 of them were dressed up as police officers, and 4 of them were dressed in blackface as inmates. They had on their orange jumpsuits, and they looked like twins. And that's just a really great example of how racism influences how they treat other people. It really is, because it's the audacity. They had the ability to walk around Walmart. They didn't care how other people felt. They didn't care how other people reacted to it. They were just so vulgar and rude and uncouth, like they had no home training, which they probably did not, especially if they thought that was funny. So it's really about how the lack of empathy and the lack of care and not really caring about the morality of how someone else feels. Moving on, I wanted to talk about systemic racism. This is probably, in America, the most, number one, it needs to be the most paid attention to form of racism, because systemic racism is a form of racism that is solely and unique for the United States. And I'll get more into that later. But systemic racism goes by multiple names. It goes by systemic racism, structural racism, or institutional racism. So these phrases are interchangeable, but they are one and the same. Systemic racism is racism that seeps into society, including rules, laws, and guiding principles that inherently favor white people over people of the global majority and indigenous people. When we say people of the global majority, you got to realize that people of color are the majority in the world. There are more people of color than there are Europeans and people of European descent in the world right now. Motherfucking Africa, they ain't had no problems making no babies. They not having no sterilization issues right now. Their population is increasing regardless of what they told you on the media. So there are more POCs right now than European people of descent. But systemic racism, again, is racism that seeps into society, and that includes laws, rules, and guiding principles. These policies and practices entrenched and established in institutions, which result in the exclusion or promotion of design groups. And it differs from overt discrimination in that no individual intent is necessary. It is inequalities rooted in the system-wide operation of society that includes substantial numbers of members of particular groups from significant participation in major social institutions. So these systems favor white people and make it so that it is more difficult for non-white people to have access to things that everyone needs. Now, I know I'm saying a lot of words and it sounds like gushy, but I want to show you that institutionalized racism is embedded in our society. I remember I was talking to my boss during 2020, and I was telling her that racism impacts all of us. And she is a good Christian lady, and she told me racism doesn't impact her because she's a child of God. Now, I'm not arguing with the fact that she is not a child of God. You could be a hermit and you could worship God. You could stay in your house 24/7. You could never go around white people. But if you live in America, you will still be affected in some way, shape, or form by a way of systemic racism because it is within every single institution within our country. So that covers the education system. The plethora of us, like I said, Mississippi has the highest black population in America, and most of us went to public schools in Mississippi, and the majority of us know that the Mississippi school system failed the fuck out of us. So I don't understand how people can sit up here and say I wasn't affected by racism when half of y'all couldn't even tell me that the mitochondria was the powerhouse of the cell. Systemic racism is responsible for the gap of employment. We saw this a lot during COVID, during the pandemic, where number one, majority of us as people of color, specifically African American people, we worked on the front lines. We were the heroes of the pandemic because we worked those minute small jobs, and they wouldn't allow us to stop working. They did not give us no type of raises for working during the pandemic, no type of health raises to ensure that we had medical benefits. Moreover, there were more African American Black people fired, laid off from their jobs, and it is a result of the gap of employment, or the fact that after everybody lost their jobs, motherfuckers couldn't find a job to be able to get hired. First one in, last one in, first one out. That's going to be us. That's the reason why there's a gap in employment. They don't want to hire African American people, and is set within the system whether or not Black people have the degrees that they need, or the name matches up to what it is that they want, whether or not there's another candidate that they want to. It's all systemic racism. That also refers to the gap in housing. African American people have the highest homeless population in America. There are more Black people on the streets strung out on drugs than any other group in America. That is because of systemic racism. The immigration gap, okay? Governmental surveillance and violence. Always remember that the police is either where they need to be, where they want to be, or where they have to be. They do not want to be in our communities unless they just trigger happy. So they are where they need to be. There's a reason why our communities are so heavily surveillance, and they have such an uptick on violence and drugs, or so they say. There is an undeniable uptick of drug arrests or police brutality within the Black community. That's not even debatable. We already know that, and there's a high mortality rate overall in general. Please do not get me started on women within the healthcare system, pregnancy rates, death, mortality, pregnancy, all that is pitiful, and it is a result of institutionalized racism because of the rules that they have made. It is embedded in the society. Even the Constitution, okay, the idea that all men were created equally, but we all are knowing in the back of our heads that when they wrote that Constitution, they were not talking about the ancestors of those who were enslaved, those who created and built enslaved over this country. So it is the silent racism that is written, woven within the fabric of our country. And what I wanted to say is that it's not like this everywhere. A great example of this would be Russia. An excellent example of this would be Russia. So during the 1920s, where really after emancipation, after the slaves were freed, there was a large migration of African American people to Russia. And Russia is a communist country. We are capitalists, right? Russia is a communist country. So the difference between Russia and the United States is that they did not have to go through the people who migrated to Russia did not have to go through systemic racism. There was no racism built within the fabric of Russia to purposely oppress that group of people. What they went through was social racism. So yeah, they went to Russia. They may have been called the N-word with a hard ER, but there's not no there's no laws within it that says that, you know, that you are 3/5 of a person, and if you got one drop of nigga blood within you, that you are considered a nigga. No. So one thing that I will say is that during this migration of African descendants of enslaved Africans of America to Russia, is the fact that a lot of them were able to create generational wealth when they migrated to Russia. And I find that so interesting that many of these Black people became millionaires and billionaires because there weren't things embedded within the country to stop them. Were they discriminated against? Yes. Most definitely, yes. But it wasn't written within the country to stop them from becoming equal, because that's what communism is that the idea of equality and equity amongst everyone. And that's why so many of the great leaders of the past, W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, a lot of these men wanted a communist state for Black people so that we would be able to have equality and equity in the same manner and force. Now, I want to go over the final form of racism, which is structural racism. And structural racism is the way that all of these different components create an environment where outcomes will automatically favor white people because of the unfair disadvantages laid upon the people of the global majority and the indigenous people. So that's really a great example would be the Karens in America, who are placed in positions of power, and they call the police and they get the crying and stuff, and the police will believe them, and something happens to the person of color in question. Okay, so though that is an example of different components that create or foster an environment where the outcome of this situation will favor the non-melanated person of color within this situation. Okay, so hopefully you have a greater understanding of racism as a whole, the ism of race, and yeah.
People say, why you take pictures when white folks stop you? Because it's important for the world to know that my agenda is not hate. My agenda is African liberation. I'm opposed to white supremacy. I'm not opposed to white people. My priority is my own people, but I have nothing against yours. I'm unapologetically African, but the problem is historically any black man who is unapologetically African, Malcolm, the Honorable Marcus Garvey, Stokely Carmichael, Huey P. Newton, anybody who is that way, we will automatically brand it as anti-everybody else. That is not true. We are Africans. We are the original humanitarians of the planet Earth. We have never been against another people, but I am unapologetically committed to my own.
So let's transition from racism to racist. A racist, as in the noun, a person. A racist is someone who believes that other races are not as good as their own, therefore treats them unfairly. Okay, that is a racist in a nutshell. Now, I want to flip it and I want to look at another form. The antithesis or the inverted form of racist is an anti-racist. And an anti-racist is someone who supports policies and actions that express the idea that racial groups are equal and eliminate racial inequity. This is an argument that I have been seeing a lot within pro-Black TikTok spaces. And the question really is, and this is a question for Black people, are you pro-Black or are you an anti-racist? And I think that is an amazing conversation to have, because it really dings and dawns upon something that I've noticed a lot, especially living down here in the South. What I've noticed is that our older generation, so that would be our baby boomers, silent generation that came before them, are very, very conservative. And the conservative ideology comes from respectability politics, as well as like wanting to get close to whiteness and wanting to be able to not only break down the master's house, but you want to use the master's tools in order to take over what the master has created, right? So a lot of Black people are not pro-Black, i.e., you want to see all Black people liberated, regardless of what it is, regardless if they're LGBTQIA, regardless if they are in the prison system, regardless if they are male or female, regardless if they're disabled or not. No, you are not pro-Black. A lot of Black people are anti-racist, and that means that you support policies that condemn racism, but you still want to be in the shit show of and try to benefit from racism on the slide. So those are the people who support colorism, people who support homophobia or transphobia, people as Black people or as people of color. And this is also a conversation for POC communities, especially like the Hispanic community or the Asian community, because they are not pro-Black. They're not. Especially the LGBT community, like the white spaces of the LGBT community, they're not pro-Black. They're anti-racism because their communities follow suit behind whatever it is the Black community is going to do. So if we fail in being able to eradicate racism and try to prevent racism from creeping into our society, they will fail because everything we do, they mimic. But let's hone this conversation back in and talk more about anti-racism, because I just feel like you guys are wrong. Are you pro-Black or are you an anti-racist? Because I will sit up here and speak pro-Black rhetoric. I will sit down and break things down for you guys, but you don't want to hear it. You don't want to hear it at all because you don't agree with it, because it doesn't support your politics of respectability. Now, I want to talk about reverse racism, because this is another big trigger word for the cum crackers, for the Caspers, the friendly ghosts and such. They like to use what's called reverse racism, especially when they're put in situations where you are condemning them for racism. And might I add, for those who just did not know, a white person's kryptonite is being called a racist. Unless they is the grand wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, they do not want to be called out and condemned for racism whatsoever. We see this going on right now with the Santos guy. I think his first name is George Santos. He threw up the white power sign on the House floor a couple days ago within 2023. The little OK symbol, it will stand for white power. He threw that up. They're calling him out for racism because that's exactly what it is. And he ain't made no statement, but he's also not going to step down from his position because he has the power to be able to do whatever it is that he wants to do. But when you are put in these positions and you are actively calling out and condemning racism within these communities that support white racism, a lot of white people feel comfortable enough to be able to call the reverse racism. Now, reverse racism is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a dominant or privileged racial or ethnic group. The reverse racism card is often pulled by white people when people of color call out racism and discrimination, or create spaces for themselves that white people are not a part of. A great example. Another reason why y'all need to be supporting me and protecting me, because why not? I be on YouTube. I be posting my little clips. I'm spreading the good word of God all through the internet. And I post my big Black shout out on the YouTubies. And I say, yes, this is an opportunity for the Black people to circulate the Black dollars within the Black community. The white man, and let me tell you another theory I got. I think all white people named Mike is racist. Because every single white man with the name Mike or Michael or Mickey or whatever the hell came up under my comment section like, yes, let's support the white people and neglect the whites, the Asians, and the Chinese. I'm like, that's reverse racism, because I'm trying to make my own space, my own special space that is for us, and you want me to sit up here and include all these other people. We need our own sacred and special place to be able to have personal conversations within ourselves. I don't mind if the good white people are listening as long as they're not talking too loud, but you coming in here telling me that I need to expand my space to be able to include all these different demographics and whatever, not gonna happen. Because when have I ever went into a space, or when have you ever went into a space and they've made so much room to make sure that they made me feel comfortable? Never. Never in the history of academia have I ever been put in a space where an academic or a white person made sure that they didn't put the hard ER whenever they was reading a word that had nigger in it. Never. Like, no. And I'm not going to sit up there and try to change it, because we need more spaces that are specifically for predominantly Black and African American people. So the impulse behind reverse racism argument seems to be the desire to prove that people of color don't have it that bad, and they're not the only ones that are put at a disadvantage or targeted because of their race. Gaslighting, that's all it is. You hear somebody pulling out a reverse racism card, you can just go ahead and assume that they racist. Because you can't sit up here and tell me that I got it that bad when you ain't never put your feet in the boots that you want me to pull myself up by. So shut the hell up.
I keep getting white people telling me that I'm racist against whites, and I get so confused because you can't be racist to white people. Not only do I not have the social power in order to enact racism on a systemic level, but when we're talking about white people and white supremacy and white privilege, we're talking about white people as an entity, as a player and actor within white supremacy and those who benefit from white privilege. We're not talking about it on a personal, individual level in their personhood necessarily. And I know what you're thinking, dang, that's really dehumanizing. You're not looking at white people as just like humans and looking at them individually. Well, no, not in this context. But it wasn't me who dehumanized white people. And it wasn't other Black people, and it wasn't other people of color. It was white colonizers who dehumanized white people. And don't just take my word for it, because I know y'all love to get mad at my word. So let's take the words of Aimé Césaire and his discourse on colonialism, where he's talking about how the colonizer decivilized himself, and that through these barbaric acts of colonizing and raping and pillaging, a gangrene set in, and this poison of savagery infiltrated their very being. And don't just take our word for it. Let's take the words of Jean-Paul Sartre, or Frantz Fanon, in The Wretched of the Earth, where, there he's begging the question, who are the true savages? Who are the true actors of barbarism? And don't just take our word for it. Take the words of Dr. Joy DeGruy and her discussing post-traumatic slave syndrome, and how she talks about all these barbaric acts of colonizing and slavery removed white people's ability to feel empathy for Black people. That they're looking at us and can't acknowledge the fact that we literally feel pain as a sentient being. And don't just take our word for it. Take the words of Karen and Barbara Fields, and how they talk about racism has become so tangible due to rituals that aren't based in anything true, that we now exist in this racecraft, this illusion of racecraft. And that white people don't see themselves as the aggressors of racism. They barely see themselves as a passive actor within racism. So that's why they'll say, oh, that man got shot because he's Black, instead of that man got shot because a racist shot him. Y'all all call that racism against white people, when really it's just history. It's critical race theory. That's the shit that you're afraid of your kids hearing. So, no, you can't be racist to white people. And it's not us who dehumanized y'all. Y'all ancestors did. And it sounds like that's something you should probably take up with y'all ancestors.
Now, the question of this episode is, can Black people be racist? Now, before I lay it out for you all, I want to start off by stating that all of the terms that I have defined thus far, and the ones that I will continue to define, can be found in Afrocentric, the blog, which is linked in my bio, and this article that I want to open up this argument with is called Can Blacks Be Racist? And it was written by Ferris State University, March of 2009. I think it is such an excellent piece, a little biased, but we'll get to that. But I think it has a great way to be able to open up this conversation. And I'm going to go ahead and read it for you guys. And the article states, quote, can Blacks be racist? The answer, of course, will depend on how you define racism. If you define it as prejudice against or hatred towards another race, then the answer is yes. If you define racism as the belief that race is the primary determinant of human traits and capabilities, that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race, then yes. And if you define racism as prejudice and discrimination rooted in race-bathing loathing, then the answer is again yes. However, if you define racism as a system of group privilege by those who have a disproportionate share of society's power, prestige, property, and privilege, then the answer is no. In the end, it is my opinion that individual Blacks can be and sometimes are racist. However, collectively, Blacks are neither the primary creators nor the beneficiaries of racism that permeates society today, end quote. Now, I do think that it is a very excellent way to start this conversation off. Now, remember at the beginning of the episode, I read to you all the definition of racism, and I will read it again. Racism involves one group having the power to carry out systemic discrimination through institutional policies and practices of the society, and by shaping the cultural beliefs and values that support those racist policies and practices. White people hold cultural power due to Eurocentric modes of thinking, and these modes of thinking are rooted in colonialism that continues to reproduce in the white privilege or the privilege of whiteness. Okay? So sit down and ask yourself, me, as a little colored girl, as a mulatto child, as a Negro boy, as a Black man, do I have the power to persecute, penalize, criminalize, enslave, or to put a group of people in jail? The answer is no. Your ass don't. Furthermore, can anything that comes out of my mouth, does it have the power to be able to sway the narrative or shape the way that the majority sees the world and have the power to demonize a group of people in a negative way? The answer, again, my friends, is no.
I don't even eat white bread. I don't even drink white milk. I don't even eat white rice, bitch.
We don't have that power to do that. And if you're asking if Black people cannot be racist, what can they be? Well, the answer is prejudice. And I still feel like that is a very arguable case. Now, prejudice is defined as a prejudgment or unjustifiable and usually negative attitude of one type of individual or group towards another group and its members. Such negative attitudes are typically based on an unsupported generalization of stereotypes that deny the right of individual members of certain groups to be recognized and treated as individuals within individual characteristics. Okay, so I get it. Black people can be a prejudice, but I feel like there needs to be more nuance added to this definition, and I will tell you why. Number one, the definition states that prejudice is a prejudgment or unjustifiable. Personally, I feel like because as Black people, white people have infiltrated our spaces or the spaces that we go to, i.e. workspaces or being in educational spaces, they have infiltrated our spaces so much that we have a great understanding we have a great understanding of what it is that they do and what it is they don't do. Thanks to social media, apps like TikTok, apps like Twitter, that give us the ability to see past the fourth wall. Now we have the ability to see what happens within their homes when we're not around. And we know what it is that white people do and they don't do. Now, for example, if I get and haul my ass up here on BB King Internet and I say that white people smell like wet dogs and little pennies when it rains outside, is that considered prejudice or is that just an opinion and or fact? Because I don't think it's an unjustifiable belief for me to think that most of them stink because they don't historically wash their ass. You know, you get what I'm saying? Also, I wanted to talk about the latter part of this definition that says deny the right of an individual member of certain groups to be recognized and treated as individuals within individual characteristics. Anyone who has an understanding of Blackness knows that as Black people, we do not get the right to be individuals when we go out in public. as a Black person, anytime we go out into the world and we have the opportunity to navigate spaces, we are seen as representatives of the entire community. That's why you always say niggas can't have shit. You can't take niggas nowhere, because you are not just your own individual self. You are a reflection not only of yourself, but of your family, your parents, and the entire race. And it is very unfortunate, but it is true whether you want it to be not or so. I don't want it to be so. But I know one thing is when I'm navigating and infiltrating white spaces and I have to represent y'all, I make you motherfuckers look good. I think I make y'all pretty proud, okay? But on the inverse side of that, white people have the luxury to be seen as individuals. If a white woman go and she pops Xannies and she go and smash the whole football team, that is not a reflection of white culture. That is a reflection of her. We don't have that type of privilege. So I don't think that there really is a way, unless, you going stupid hard, to be able to deny the right of individual members of certain groups. You can't deny individuality to white people because that is a part of their inherent privilege. But I digress. I wanted to read another quote from this article that states that racism is more than a matter of individual prejudice and scattered episodes of discrimination designed by African Americans to exclude white Americans from full participation in the rights, privileges, and benefits of society. Black or other minority racism will require not only a widely accepted racist ideology directed at whites, but also the power to systemically exclude whites from opportunities and rewards in major economics, cultural, and political institutions. While there are Black Americans with anti-white prejudice, and there are instances of Black discrimination against whites, these examples are not central to the core operations of U.S. society and are not entrenched structural of institutional racism, end quote. So again, we don't have the power to be able to do any of that foolishness or nonsense whatsoever. And there are most definitely are some anti-white racists out here in the Black community. The Hoteps, they out here doing the Lord's work. They is the most anti-white group you probably gonna run up against. They gonna tell you that white people was genetically altered and manufactured in a lab in the Caucasus Mountains. They gonna say that. They gonna say that somebody fucked around and put some sugar and spice and nothing nice into the bowl and they just came to be. There's what the Hoteps do, and they serve a purpose within this Black ecosystem. Do I support the Black Hoteps? No, because they are misogynistic. But that's neither here nor there in the purpose of this conversation and debate and debacle. Okay? There definitely are some there are instances of Black discrimination against white. There definitely are. But those examples in the grand scheme of things are few and far in between. Okay, for the most part, I think Black people are very accepting. I really feel like for the most part, Black people really don't hold or harness no type of just grand threat. Now, I do think niggas is getting tired. I do indeed and believe that niggas is getting tired, but I think the fear of Black people comes from the idea that Black people one day will retaliate because of the hundreds of years of discrimination and racism and systemic oppression that we went through. But if niggas in America was going to retaliate, they would have been did it by now, right? I don't know. I don't want to give up all the clues and answers. Y'all never know what's going on through the Black community. But what I will say is that I don't think that for the majority of y'all that y'all are racist. I really don't even think y'all are prejudiced, because I feel like y'all been around white people long enough to be able to understand what the fuck is going on and what you're saying and what you're not saying, and it's not unjustifiable. And then to be justifiable, someone has to prove whether or not it's justified. And if it's not factual, then it's an opinion. But if it's factual, then it couldn't be prejudice. I don't know. These are my thoughts. I want to end it with this quote that states that racial minorities and women do not have appropriate shares of power, prestige, property, and privilege. This inequality is one of the criteria that sociologists use to define the word minority. In other words, sociologists accept as an asthmatic that minorities must have less power, otherwise they are not conceptualized as minorities. Yes, this too may be circular reasoning. This does not mean that minorities cannot be racist, though. It means rather that a minority seen as a category does not have the same or as many opportunities to hurt, discriminate against the majority group. End quote. And I also feel like it is time for us as minority people to start addressing other minority groups of people, because those groups of people are racist. You know, we done, I hate to do it, but I done had a bone to pick with the Hispanic community for a while, because they are racist. They racist for real, and they've been warming up. They've been warming up to the white community when we not around, and they let all that anti-racist rhetoric, all that white supremacist shit copy paste, and they be all up in the white folks' ear, rubbing all up against their shoulder, trying to get them to hear what they want to hear, so they can get a little bit of power too. Y'all can be racist against us because y'all hold more power than we do, and we know y'all do. And I don't like it per se. I don't. And I don't understand how these people of color in these other communities who receive their rights with us because of us mimicked our doggone, mimicked everything from the civil rights movement, feminist ideology and logic. They learn how to wash their ass from us. Yet and still, they don't want to give us credit, and they want to take the time to oppress a group of people. That just don't make sense to me. Now, y'all might be the real enemies out here after a while, especially down here in the South, because we know what type of time these white people are on. We like that is one of the things about being culturally in Mississippi in the South. These races out here gonna let you know what type of time it is. All you gotta do is look at the back of the bumper, baby. We know they racist. We know what "don't tread on me" mean. We know when we see that Confederate flag, either mind your business or go dumb. We know what time it is, but when we see y'all, we don't know. So I think it is time for us to have that conversation, but that is a conversation for another day.
Shout out to the slaves.
Yeah, shout out to the slaves. You feel me? Shout out to Harriet Tubman. That
Shout
was
out
my
to she's
bitch.
a real nigga.
Shout out to the real niggas.
And shout out again to all those people who hate my guts.
Y'all are doing a justice and an effort to the world. Keep breaking these men down one at a time.
You are obsessed and sick.
Hello and welcome back to the Big Black Shout Out, the blackest motherfucking shout out in the world. Yes, so the Big Black Shout Out is an opportunity to help circulate the black dollar back into our communities and for audience members to explore black-owned hidden gems. So I have 2 shout outs for you guys today, and they are the result of the Black Girl Follow Train. Shout out to all the black baddies, all my black queens on TikTok that are following and supporting. The first girl that I would like to shout out, her name is Akila, and her business name is Nails by Kiki Zero, and she is located in Chicago, Illinois. And this is her business statement, y'all. Akila is still in high school right now, and she is starting a YouTube channel, a nails business, and a hair business. But her only focus is on YouTube and nails because that's what she's doing right now. She wants y'all to know that times are tough for her, and her mama just moved, and they not in the best predicament. So she wants to start her business so she can get that money rolling in. Kiki girl, we feel you, and that's why we wanted to shout you out today. Y'all make sure y'all go follow my girl. She's in high school, y'all. Just imagine where y'all were in high school. Half of y'all weren't thinking about starting no business, not no nails, not no hair, not no nothing. Y'all weren't even trying to sell chips. So we're gonna follow and support my girl Kiki. You can follow her on TikTok at kiki.debrat11, Instagram Kiki the Fines, as well as Snapchat Kiki the Fines. It's KEKETHEFINES, and TikTok that's Kiki KEKE period DABRAT 11. Yeah, shout out to my girl Kiki. She out here doing the Lord's work. And I just want to say that we support you at the Afrocentric podcast with all of your endeavors. Moving along, I wanted to shout out another girl that I have met as a result of the Black Girl Follow Train. Her name is Obi. Shout out to my homegirl Obi. She also has a Black pod. Shout out to all the Black girl podcasters in the world. So Kiki says that her podcast is called Obi's World. She is also from Chicago, and her mission is to create a safe place for young women and girls to feel as though they are not alone in the issues that they go through, and to educate women and girls on issues that affect us, and to bring more awareness to issues specific to women of color, mainly Black women. Obi, I know that's right. And she is currently a student in college majoring in political science. So let me shout out her social media handles. Her Instagram is OBIAMARAADINDU. My girl Obi, she is of African descent. I don't want to butcher her name, so we're going to keep it respectful. Okay? Let me spell it for y'all again. OBIAMARAADINDU. Now, her podcast page I can pronounce, and that's Obi's World Podcast. OBYSWORLDPODKAST. Her Snapchat and TikTok is at OBYADINIDBO0. Shout out to Obi. Her podcast is phenomenal, and we love all the Black content creators and all the new Black listeners and all of the Black wonders of the world. So if you have a Black owned business, or you know somebody with a Black owned business and you want a free shout out, make sure you are contacting me. You can find me on any social media platform, and I also have created my own podcast page on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. They're all at the Afrocentric Podcast. Okay, that's Afrocentric Podcast. Make sure you are also emailing me at Afrocentric Podcast. That's Afrocentric Podcast at gmail.com. Thank you guys so much for chilling with me here at the Afrocentric Podcast. Remember, if someone call you racist, you tell that bitch, hell no. How can I be racist? Maybe your mama racist. Okay? So, again, I want to thank you guys for choosing to be Afrocentric today. Please remember that Black lives matter. Let's make sure that we are listening and protecting Black children and women. And the only thing that you must do in this lifetime is to be Black and die. And here at the Afrocentric Podcast, we're just civilized people having civilized conversations. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.
Do you hate all white people? I don't think it's a fair question. The white man doesn't even come into my attitude. Mr. Muhammad teaches us to love our own kind and let the white man take care of himself. For a white man today, sir, after kidnapping millions of black people from Africa, stripping them of all human characteristics and relegating them to the role of chattel or cattle or animals, commodity, merchandise that could be bought and sold at will, and then 100 years since the Emancipation Proclamation, using every type of deceptive method to further us into slavery, called second-class citizenship, I think that it would take a whole lot of nerve for white people today to ask Negroes, do they hate them?